Hello, folks. Today we're going to talk about a no driving issue on your Honda Snowblower. I'm talking about your snowblower was driving perfectly fine forward and reverse, and then it stopped driving. So we're going to talk about the different reasons why. And I got three different models out here. I've got the old 80s with the manual transmission. I got the hydrostatic transmissions Honda here, and then I got the new HSS model here. So we're going to discuss uh, the different reasons. Like most of the time when people post on the Honda group, they'll say, "Hey, Anthony, the Honda's not moving," and people will jump in and they'll say, "Oh, your right side transmission broke. Your gearbox." This gearbox here, something broke in the gearbox, the pin broke or something, and that's why it's not driving. That could be true, but the way I handle problems on a Honda, I always go for the simplest first. So, simplest is usually the reason. A broken gearbox is a little bit down on the list, okay? So, just don't jump to conclusions that it's the worst case scenario. Um, let's check the obvious things first. Okay, here's an old 80s, 50s, 55s, 70s, and 80s. They got the manual transmission. It doesn't have the transmission release down here like the hydrostatic model, so you can rule that out. Okay, so usually, if it's not driving, I'll tell the owner, all right, take the belt cover off. You got your belt cover here. It's four little bolts. You take it off. And the first thing I would check, well, first thing I would check actually is the handle. See, I'd say, hey, is the handle loose or do you feel resistance? If it's loosey goosey, then it could be the cable. Okay, but assuming that this is okay, then I would say, okay, let's check the belt. Let's check this drive belt. See, here's your auger belt. Here's your drive belt on the inside. It's smaller. If it's broken, you'll know about it. You'll see that it's broken. It's really loose. You can pull it right out because it broke, or it came off. See, it might have come off. Here's the wheel here, and it made it come off. Okay, so the first thing I would check would be your belt. Now, I told you in the previous videos, you do not have to remove this bucket to replace the dry belt. I guess I'm going to have a future video on how to do this. It takes 15 or 20 minutes to replace this belt. Anyways, the second thing I would check, if your handle's really loose, see, here's your drive axle cable right here. See, it connects to this spring, okay? And when you've got the handle down like I do now, it engages the idler, your tensioner. It engages this wheel here that engages your belt. So if the belt is okay, and you, of course, you got the key off when you're working around here. I usually pull the plug, the boot off the plug too, and I'll move the belt and make sure it moves okay. So let's say the belt is okay. You already checked the belt really quickly. I would check the cable. The cable might be broken, or you see where it connects to the top of the spring where the hook is. A lot of times on the older machines, this hook will break, and you have to replace the spring. You could have to replace the cable too if the cable's broke. But I would check this, make sure that it's connected to the spring. And then what I would do is that I would work it. Let's see, working the handle, making sure it's engaging the belts. You see how the cable is pulling up on that spring and engaging the tensioner to the belt. See, this is fine. This is working fine. Now, if the spring was broken, or the cable is broken, this would be so loose. This would be loose, very, very loose. You know something's wrong because it's just loose. So that's what I would check on the 80s first. Okay. Assuming that these two items are okay, what else could it be? Please comment. Please make your comments in the bottom. I'm going to show you. Here's an 80 that's I put up on the nose to show you the friction disc transmission. Here's your friction disc. Okay. Now, in some cases, this is kind of rare. The first two, the belt being broken is usually the problem on an older machine if it's not driving. So we already found out that the belt is okay and the spring and the cable's okay. Next thing I would do is put the machine up on the nose, and then I would take the bottom plate off and check this friction disc. This is a rubber friction disc. It engages with this drive wheel from your transmission. This is and here's your sub transmission, and this friction disc engages this wheel engages the friction disc, which engages the uh, the drive box here. This is your final drive gearbox that works your tracks. Okay. Now, if this is rubber, I don't know if you can see it, but it's rubber. If this breaks, then you have to replace your friction disc. It's about 50 or 60 bucks plus labor. That's still available actually from the Honda dealers and aftermarket. So if this could break over time, um, right now it could also be out of adjustment too. In some cases, if you're not driving, it's out of adjustment where the wheel is not contacting your drive wheel here. I'm going to show you. You see how I'm moving the drive wheel and it's moving your friction disc. This is okay. In some cases, sometimes I pick up a machine and the person said, "Well, it doesn't work in third gear or it doesn't work in first gear, but the other gears work okay." A lot of times this can be adjusted. The tension of the friction disc to the wheel can be adjusted. So, like this is in reverse right now, and I'm just showing you uh, that it's working fine. But if I was moving this wheel and your friction disc wasn't moving, then this might be a needed adjustment. Another reason why it wouldn't be working is if this wheel has oil or water on it, so it's slipping. So your friction disc, this is spinning, but your friction disc is not moving because it's too slippery. See, so it's got oil or water on it. You have to dry it off. And the worst case scenario would be that something broke in this gearbox. This is called the final drive gearbox. If something broke in there, you know, your belt is spinning this, okay, and moving your friction disc. And see this shaft here, that shaft is moving, but your tracks are not moving. You've already made sure that it's in gear, and everything's supposed to where it's supposed to be. It's in gear and everything. The belt's working. The tension is working to engage the belt, and this is spinning. This is spinning, and something's not connected. Something's broken in your gearbox. Now, this is the worst case scenario. You don't want to jump to this conclusion right at the beginning. You want to check everything simple first: the belt, the cable, the spring, and then you'd put it up on here and check all this. So the worst case scenario is that the dry box is broken. Okay. Now let me move over to the hydrostatic machine. I get a lot of panicky emails every winter. Oh, I took my machine out of the garage. It was working fine the last time, and now it's not working. Now it's not driving back and forth. Well, the first thing I tell people is make sure that the transmission is engaged. If you want to move it out of the driveway or move the machine without the engine on, you just stick it in release position. See, it's released on this side. And then you can move the machine around. And then when you want to drive it with the engine on, you push it over engaged. And you'd be surprised how many times that's all the problem is. All you have to do is make sure that it's an engaged, okay? And then you're good to go. I see it happen all the time in the wintertime. People panicking about this. So I said, okay, let's check that. You check that to make sure that's an engaged. And then you go through uh, the same course like I showed you before. You check your handle here. This is your drive handle. You see it? It's got good tension and everything. It's engaging I don't know if you can see it. It's engaging the belt. You see it? I can check the spring and the cable. The cable's not broken. It's working the tensioner, the wheel to engage the belt. I've already checked the belt. Um, Most of the time, when the machine won't drive, if it's not the engaged lever, released engaged, it's the belt. Usually, it's the belt. So, don't panic. Just take off the belt cover, which is really easy. Check your belt. Make sure that the key's off, and pull the boot off the spark plug. You see, I'm turning this around. I'm turning the belt, and it's turning okay. It's not broken. Okay. If it's broken, you'll know it, of course, and it's not too hard to replace. So that's the second thing. The first thing is the engage. Down here, you're engaged or whatever, and then checking the belt and the cable. You can check the fluid, and this is a hydrostatic transmission, so you can check the fluid and make sure there's fluid in the cup here. See, it's low, but it's supposed to be low. You got two different levels here. This is when it's cold, and this is when it's warmed up. So it really doesn't show much oil in here. If you don't see any oil in here, then that's cause for concern. So you've already checked the simple things first, okay? Then you check the oil in the transmission. Here's your hydrostatic transmission. All right. If you don't see any oil in that cup, I would suspect this seal pushed out or is leaking, or it could be the other side. Here's a seal. See, it's supposed to be flush with the case. And this happens quite a bit in the wintertime too. I had 3 or 4 cases of this past winter. They checked everything else first, the simple things, and then I said, well, check the oil in the reservoir. And they said, no, there's no oil in the reservoir. And I said, well, go underneath, look underneath, and look to see if this seal is pushed out. Let me show you. Here's your hydrostatic transmission under here. It's hard to show. Okay, here's your transmission. And I asked the owner to check both sides to see if the seal is pushed out. Now, if the seal is pushed out, then the oil leaked out, of course, and the machine's not going to work, not going to drive. The oil leaked out of here. Most of the time, we can push this seal back in, block it with we can put a hose clamp on the shaft here. We can block it in so it doesn't come back out. Most of the time that works. And then you put some more oil in. You have to bleed the system, which is a whole different story. And then you're good to go. Now, the worst case would be that the seal is damaged. You push it back in, and then you work the machine, and then it leaks oil anyways because the seal is cracked or dried or whatever. Then the seal has to be replaced, which is it's a pretty major operation actually. You're gonna take the side of the engine bed off. It's a pain in the neck It's a $6 seal, but most of the time the seal can be pushed back in and secured with a hose clamp or some kind of clamp so it won't push back out. And most of the time that works. And another thing I want to show you, here's your engaged release lever. Now, extremely rare, but I did have one case where the pin had fallen out. This pin is held in with a cotter pin. I don't know if you can see it. There's a little pin that holds this other pin in. I've only seen this a couple times in the last 7 years. This pin came out. So this wasn't working. It was in the release position and it stayed in the release position because this pin had either broken or fell out. Very, very rare. I mean, that's one thing you can check, but it's extremely rare for this to happen. I've only seen it happen like twice. But it's something else to check. Um, Another thing, okay, you've checked your transmission fluid and it's fine, and you've checked your everything else first. You always go from the simplest on up. And we check the engaged release position, make sure it's engaged. Then we took the belt cover off. We checked the belt. That's okay. We checked the spring and the cable. That's okay. Now another very rare instance would be this pin. This is your drive wheel. This pin can break. You know, you get jammed up or whatever, pin could break. And the axle will turn, but your tracks won't go. Now, most of the time, only one pin breaks. And then the person's saying to me, hey, Anthony, the machine's going around in circles. Only one track is turning. The other track's not turning. So I'll say, all right, check this pin. If it's broken, then you need to replace the pin. It's about $3 or so. I've seen a couple cases where the owner jammed up the machine in a berm or some ice or whatever, and both pins broke at the same time. I could not believe it. It's very, very rare. It's happened a couple times though that both pins can break at the same time, and the axle, that's your drive axle, will turn, but your sprocket wheels are not going to turn and drive your tracks. That's a, what do you call it at the racetrack? A long shot, but it can happen. Okay. Now you've checked all this stuff already. The last thing you can check, the last thing you're going to have to check is your right side gearbox. I already talked about the right side gearbox on the other machine. If it's something broke in that gearbox, then it's not going to drive. And the way to test it was start the engine, put it in engaged position, uh, clamp down your your drive handle, okay, and see if your shaft on your hydrostatic transmission is turning. You know, put it in reverse or forward, it doesn't matter. Full reverse or full forward. And if you see that shaft turning, something's broken in your right gearbox. Let me show you this gearbox a little bit better. Here's the gearbox. This is what I'm talking about. It's called the final drive gearbox on a hydrostatic engine on a model, or right side transmission box. If something's broken, this is your drive axle. There's a pin on this axle that connects to the one of the main gears. Usually the pin on this breaks, and then your gears are not going to turn in here, and this goes into your hydrostatic transmission that that turns this whole box and makes your tracks move. Now that's the worst case scenario, folks. Don't want you to panic if your machine stops driving forward as a backwards. You check all the simple things first. Now I probably left something out. This cable. Here's your forward reverse cable. If the cable breaks, usually the customer or owner will say to me, "Hey Anthony, it only works in forward. It doesn't work in reverse," or vice versa. Usually, it's because the cable is froze up or broke. The cable could be broke, or it's kinking up, and the cable's not working your transmission shaft, your forward reverse shaft. So usually, when this cable goes bad, it will still drive in one position. It will drive either in forward or reverse. Very rarely has anybody ever put it, perfectly in neutral. Here's your neutral. Very rarely has anybody put it perfectly in neutral, and the machine won't move. Usually it will move a little bit. So that's a long shot too. Okay, so you always go from the simplest reason first and move yourself up. If I missed anything, please make a comment. Let's go to your HSS Honda. I removed the belt cover on this. This has got a chute motor. It's because you got your joystick up here. I'm not really familiar with these models yet, but the first thing, if it's not driving, it doesn't have the let's see, yeah, it doesn't have the engaged released lever on the HSS models. So if it's not driving forwards or backwards, I would check the cable first and then do the same thing we did on the old 80 on the hydrostatic model. You want to make sure that your spring's not broken, it's engaging the belt, and the belt is there. Okay, if it's not driving, usually it's the belt that's broken. If the belt's there and you can ascertain that the belt's moving freely, you make sure uh, your tensioner is working, so it's engaging your belt. Now I need some help on this, guys, from Honda techs, Honda dealers, HSS owners. I'm not really sure what else it could be. It could be the transmission, the hydro gear transmission. Something's wrong with the transmission. It's a chain drive. It's an independent chain drive. You got chain for one side, and you got a chain for the other side too. So it could be the chains. It could be your. I'm just guessing. This locks up your track. See, when you pull this in, the track stops. Now the odds of both tracks stopping at the same time are probably slim. So could it be the cables? Could it be these steering cables? They're both something's not engaging the transmission shaft, so the tracks won't move. You tell me, Honda dealers, techs or whatever. You tell me if that could be the problem, or it could be the chains, or it could be the actual transmission that's gone bad. So, like I said, I'm not too familiar with the HSS models. I always check the obvious first. I check the cable, check the belt, check to make sure that the tension wheel is engaging your belt. So that always go for the simplest first. Okay. So that's pretty much how you diagnose a no drive problem on your Hondas. Okay. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe. And I'm sure make some comments and suggestions underneath the video, and we can discuss other reasons why you don't have a drive. So thank you very much for watching. Have a great day.